Hello and welcome to episode 114 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' weekly podcast of a myriad of topics. I'm Mike Sollosi and I'm monsoon on the RPGFan.com boards, and today with me is Alana Hagues.
Hello, everyone. I'm Duncan Falcons on the boards. Always great to be here. I'm very excited to be here this week.
Right on, and we are only a duo this week, but we are a duo that will be discussing Breath of Fire 4, the classic Capcom PS1 RPG, and for a series that has seen better days, but these are the better days of Breath of Fire. So I've had a lot of fun playing the beginning of it, and we're gonna have a lot of fun talking about it. So Alana, like prior to playing Breath of Fire 4 for the podcast, what's your history with the series?
Um, I have played Breath of Fire 4 before. I played it when it first came out. My memory's very, very hazy of it though, so um, I don't really remember too much about it. So it's been really nice coming back and playing it. But otherwise, I have played Breath of Fire 3 and Breath of Fire 5, Dragon Quarter.
Mm.
So I've played all of the more recent games. I didn't finish Breath of Fire 5. And I know that it's a very popular game amongst some staff members.
Mm-hmm.
I hated it when I played Breath of Fire 5, but we're
That
not here to talk about that.
yeah, that's the
Dragon
one that's a
Quarter.
little bit more like a roguelike. Right.
Exactly. I
Okay.
reckon I need to give it a second chance for sure, and will do definitely. But Breath of Fire 3 and 4, I've both played both. We didn't get Breath of Fire 3 until the PSP re-release in 2006 or 7, the same as Tales of Eternia. Um,
Those are two PSP releases that did not come out in the United States physically, uh, but
no.
but we did get both of those games as PS1 games. So I'm not saying that the UK had it better.
No. But I haven't played any of the older ones, so 1 and 2 I've kind of not touched and maybe steered clear of a little bit. But I really remember enjoying my time with 3 and what I remember of 4. They're quite quaint RPGs. They're very old school, so it's nice to come back and play them in the middle of a year which has been overloaded with really good stuff. So it's
Yeah.
nice to take a few years back. Yeah,
2017 has been
definitely.
crazy, but we'll talk about that on a different podcast. Now, me personally, I'm almost the opposite of you, Alana. I've only played the older games, 1, 2, and 3. I've played, but I only finished 2. I got I don't know, 4 or 5 hours into 1 and like 9 or 10 hours into 3. But I finished Breath of Fire 2 to completion, and old school and quaint are two appropriate adjectives for that one. I don't think it's one of the best top tier RPGs on the Super Nintendo, which is a system with a lot of good RPGs on it. But I remember liking the characters and sort of like the visual design of the game. I thought it had a cool, colorful world with cool animal characters. So which is and I liked fusing um, priestesses into my characters to turn them into monsters, I guess. But Breath of Fire 2 is weird. But
Mm.
I thought Breath of Fire 2 was all right, but not as good as the best Super Nintendo RPGs, and I didn't get that grabbed by Breath of Fire 1 or 3. I remember being stuck in a long dungeon in 3 and just giving up because there were so many other good PS1 RPGs.
Yeah, it came out at a bad time, and Breath of
Yeah.
Fire 4 kind of came out at a bad time as well. It came out the same year Chrono Cross came out, and also came out towards the end of the PS1's life cycle. I think it came out 2000 in America and 2001 in Europe.
Yeah, well,
So that was
I
pretty
bought
big.
a PS1 in 2000, so I was playing catch up on a lot of RPGs. And when Breath of
Mm.
Fire 3 happened, I think I tried playing it when I was in college, so probably in the '05 '06 range, and it just did not grab me when I was surrounded by a giant PS1 backlog and the beginning of a PS2 backlog. So I never really connected with Breath of Fire 3, but what I've played of 4, and I'm about, I think, 10 hours in right now in Breath of Fire 4, I like it a lot more than 3 so far.
Good. That's good because it's a fans often dispute over 3 and 4. They're almost like equal footing. I can completely see why, and I need to give 3 a replay as well because it's been a fair few years since I've done that. But there are minor differences between the two, but they're quite similar fundamentally, and there's a couple of different mechanics that are added into 4.
Hmm.
But I think once you've played 4, you can go back and play 3 quite easily. They just play quite similarly. And obviously they all look really nice. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, my more immediate goal is to finish 4 because I'm a little further behind than I would rather, and I'm definitely not at a halfway point. I'm a little bit into chapter 2, and my understanding is that there's 4 chapters, but Uh, One thing that you mentioned how 3 feels similar to 4, I think that is one thing that is true of at least all 4 of the ones I've played is that there is a thematic and setting consistency here,
Hmm.
because Breath of Fire, the world of Breath of Fire is very colorful, and there's a lot of anthropomorphic animal people, like multiple races living in what I would say is relative harmony.
Yeah.
But like even in the first couple towns in Breath of Fire 4, there's humans, and then there's dog people and cat people and mole people and fish people and frog people and
It's
anteater
gorgeous.
armadillo people
Yes.
and winged people and plant people and occasional robots or automata of some kind. And
Hmm.
the funny thing is that it's been like that since the beginning. They're not like introducing new wacky races of characters. There's playable mole people and fish people and frog people in Breath of Fire 1 and 2. It's a really cool, colorful fantasy world that is consistently that way game to game. It's quite impressive.
Mm. And even the humans that you do encounter aren't really humans. So you've referred to the winged people, which are the mostly citizens of Windia, and Nina is a winged person, I think, in every single game. But like
Yes.
maybe slight spoilers for the end of chapter two, but Ryu is not, or I might have even dropped it. Well, obviously, we know that Ryu in every game is some kind of race that can turn into a dragon, and
Yes.
in this, he's something endless.
Yeah. In
So that,
uh in if memory serves, in Breath of Fire 2, the dragon people were a race that basically ruled the Breath of Fire world many years
yeah.
ago and are either dying out or underground or very rare in the world then. And I think that's basically consistent with 3 and 4, because in both of them there's only a handful of dragon people that you encounter, and dragons are very rare, special monsters in a world full of all kinds of monsters.
Well, in four, they're gods
Yeah.
specifically. So yeah, they're yeah, very rare indeed.
And I maybe there's okay. I don't think this is a major spoiler, but when in a couple of the Folu segments, they mention that he's searching for his other half, or some another dragon that will make him more powerful or more complete. I think that's pretty obviously Ryu.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
so there's some kind of like Folu and Ryu. I understand are very special, unusual dragon people. And is this, um, maybe this is jumping ahead a little bit. Does it seem weird to you that Ryu can transform into into a sort of humanoid dragon form from the beginning, but it doesn't seem to startle Cray or Nina at all?
No, it does. Yeah, I thought that. I was like, surely I can't transform into my dragon. Oh, I can. But you haven't told Mina. And I'm thinking, it's really obvious anyway, because
Yeah.
the beginning of the game cranks up that Cray and Nina are on their sand flyer and they get attacked by the sand dragon or a dragon because he's stirred up. He's upset because he's felt there's another dragon in presence or another endless in presence. And that is clearly Ryu, who is laying
Hmm.
in the middle of a pit naked.
Yeah, well, no,
It's
no,
not,
no, but there was a flying dragon, and then like there's a bright light, and then there's Ryu in a pit naked.
yes. Yeah, that's right.
But what bothered me was that Cray and Nina aren't surprised or bothered or anything by Ryu transforming into a dragon for every boss battle. In my case,
Yeah, pretty much. Um, yeah, so the stuff you alluded to earlier, you're not actually far off of being told specifically that Folu is the other half of Ryu. So
yeah, and
yeah,
also Ryu
a
is a
just
fire
nice little
dragon and
idea.
Folu is a water dragon, which is a
Hmm.
nice little yin and yang thing going on. I dig it.
Very cool. Yeah, very, very cool indeed.
But anyway, so we should run it back a little bit. Breath of Fire games all have anthropomorphic animal characters for much of your party, if not basically all of your party in every game. Um, the party so far where I am in the game, you have Ryu the Dragon Man, Nina the Winged Girl, Cray the Tiger Man, Skias the Dog Man, and Urshin the quirky female robot.
Yeah,
And
so you got one more. Yeah.
oh yeah, so one more I haven't met yet, I guess, and
No.
which makes sense because there's 6 spaces in the menu. It's easy to see, um, which I think it's a fun variety of silhouettes and character types, which is something that I like a lot. Which I've probably heard me mention in recent podcasts because FF7 has come up a couple times in recent podcasts, but
Yeah.
So far, I really, really like these characters, even though I don't think they get a ton of dialogue to shine.
No, they don't.
It,
They're just a nice camaraderie, don't they? I think it's that. I mean, I said before we started recording that these feel like old, quaint RPGs and the kind of SNES era, and they have that like ability about them that you don't need all this dialogue to interact. So you would like going back to the Chrono Trigger episodes, you like those characters because of their designs, because of the way that they fit in with the party and how different they all are off of each other. And I think the same applies to Breath of Fire 4, in that although each of the characters follows a specific trope, like Nina's the determined princess, but she's clumsy and she's also
and,
gets
and and
upset by little
naive and
things.
yeah, and
Yeah.
cares very much about justice but can't execute it herself, really.
Yeah, exactly. So they all follow a series of tropes, but actually it works in their favor because they just really balance each other out and they work really well together and they're so diverse. Like, you brought up Urshin. Urshin, initially, when I first played it back in 2001, I was not convinced I would like them because I'm not really a robot person or anything like that. But Urshin is turning out to be my favorite character so far. And we'll talk about it later or maybe next episode, but she, as a
The,
bit of a,
uh, uh,
yeah,
Urshin does refer to herself as a she many times.
ah,
I
ah,
have noticed that, which has me, which raises one eyebrow in my on my face.
it can raise one eyebrow on your face, but don't worry, I'm saying he, she because something happens later in the game and
Oh,
you find out. Yeah, so
okay.
it's only at the end of chapter 2, so we can talk about it maybe towards the end.
Uh,
Urshin is, or I can dive in.
no, no, we'll save that a little for later. But
Hmm.
I want to stay where we are now and on how we don't get a lot of dialogue because maybe it's because I've played a lot of Square RPGs which are story and dialogue heavy, or maybe more recent RPGs which just have more dialogue and more cutscenes than Breath of Fire 4
Precisely.
does. But I think that I'm getting a lot of my feel for the characters and in more in battle than in regular dialogue because like when you run through a dungeon in Breath of Fire 4, you're not going to get people talking throughout the dungeon. It's not going to be like, oh, you pause every few rooms and you hang out and they say something. It's there's not a lot of
Hmm.
of regular text where the characters interact. And if you have Urshan in your party, often there'll be story scenes where Urshan doesn't say anything because I guess she doesn't have much to say. But I'm getting, but in battle, you get more voice work out of them. They're these really big, good-looking, expressive sprites that I think show the character personality a little bit. Maybe it's just like Capcom in the '90s had a lot of really good sprite work because this is a game that came out around the same time as oh I don't know Street Fighter Alpha 2 and just right
Yeah.
when Capcom was at their big, colorful, cartoony best,
Mm.
designing sprites. So I think just like the way that how good the sprites look in battle, and just the like you get something out of the characters from like the personality of their designs rather than a lot of dialogue. And if anything, I would like for this game to have more dialogue because I do like the five characters I've met so far. But
Mm.
again, maybe it's because I've just played a lot of modern RPGs and Square RPGs. The characters feel a little flat in dialogue, but very unique and expressive in their design.
Yeah, I'd agree with that for definite. I mean, some characters obviously get more time to shine than others. So
Mm.
obviously Nina and Cray, Ryu's obviously the silent protagonist anyway. I know you've just got Skius, but he doesn't get a lot of time to shine. And again, you have to kind of interpret it through the way he moves and the way his character design and things like that.
I very much appreciate his lazy approach to his job as a what would you call him like a parole officer almost.
A mercenary. He's a mercenary,
Right.
basically. Yeah. I think we discussed this on the dog episode.
Yeah.
But yeah,
There's dog people in every Breath of Fire game,
there is.
and he is a very good. And this is something that didn't really occur to me when and it was just you and I on the dog episode, just like now.
Yeah,
Um, but like I think Skius looks a little bit like a sheepdog, and
he does.
dogs in other Breath of Fire games don't always look the same. Like Bao in Breath of Fire 2 is a bulldog, and Bao in Breath of Fire 1 is more of a hound dog, or like sort of a more wolf-like dog. But I think Skias is a sheep dog because you know how shaggy and how his fur hangs a little
Yeah,
bit,
not
and
floppy ears, but yeah.
yeah, exactly. But and I'm getting the impression he's supposed to guard your party like a sheepdog guarding sheep, but he's a very lazy sheepdog that doesn't care much about his job.
It's an interesting interpretation for him because as I said, we talked about I think I brought this up in the dog episode, but and we will go into this probably more in episode 2 of this podcast, but Breath of Fire 4 is quite notorious for having a lot of censorship in it, and Skias is probably the biggest culprit of this because
All right, he's
um,
a drunk, right?
he's a drunk. In Japan, he has a drinking problem, so I think they've translated it over as a stammer and his laziness. So he's not alcoholic, he's just lazy. That's like balancing out the two things. But I think Skias Skias is a good dog, but he's not got a lot of interaction and he doesn't get too much anyway, as far as I remember. But he's just kind of the cool silent type anyway. Like he fits that stereotype again. You brought up the sprite work and you brought up Capcom's really like colorful bright period, and this might be a controversial statement, but I think Breath of Fire for sprite work is the best sprite work I've ever seen and been involved with because
Oh
it is
wow.
it's gorgeous. Like,
This is
to me,
this is
it's one of
very
my
good,
favorite.
especially for an RPG. Like I mean, I play a lot of fighting games from the late '90s, early 2000s, and and I have a very there's a very warm place in my heart where I think of the Street Fighter Alpha and like Garou Mark of the Wolves and King of Fighters 99's kind of sprite work, and this is a level of expressiveness and color that is at that.
For definite, it definitely rivals those. But for an RPG, it's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I think the way that we went into this really the way that they move and in battle, like the wind blows through Ryu's hair and Skias is standing there and his cloak blows in the wind and you've got Urshin's little cape, Nina's wings are flapping, you've got Kray's tails wagging, and
And
all of them moving
The
in
way
different
Cray
ways.
handles his giant club, where he'll like lay it on the ground for magic attacks. He has to like hoist it, like communicating that it's really heavy, and it's just like with all these small movements, it's communicating sort of like the build and the whether they're clumsy or agile, whether they're just, there's a lot of subtleties in the way these sprites move that is you
Hmm.
can really tell that it was that this game had animators and artists that were at the top of their game making this.
Absolutely. I think my favorite animation is Urshin's running animation, where she just scrunches up and hovers everywhere. So I like to try and use her as much as I can because it's just really cute. But it's just, even the enemy sprites are really wonderful to look at. They're so bright and diverse and they move in such different ways. It's just really wonderful. I just really, really love looking at this game. It just is absolutely beautiful, really.
And also, well, I'll get to my favorite sprite work in just a minute, but tying into that, this game has more of an Eastern aesthetic than I'm used to seeing in fantasy RPGs, which fantasy RPGs love living in medieval Europe, Norse mythology, kind of like Tolkien inspired fantasy sometimes, or like Tolkien inspired fantasy that goes through a Japanese lens to become this unique JRPG look that you and I have grown very attached to over the years. But
Mm.
Breath of Fire 4 feels more Eastern in that there's more Eastern architecture. Um, Characters dress in a way that isn't like your medieval European armor. Like Ryu is basically wearing kung fu pants,
Yeah.
and like basically the look of the characters makes me think of, especially since most of the first quarter of the game is in sort of a desert region, is like a martial arts wuxia story in the Silk Road or something.
Yeah. I
And
like that. Yeah.
yeah, and tying into that, my favorite animated sprite work is Fo Lu because he's so cool with his like he summons a laser sword. He has these very aloof, badass gestures when he casts spells, and when he does his normal attacks, it does the Dragon Ball Z sort of vanishing speed kind of movement,
Yeah.
which is another like wuxia martial arts story thing that Toriyama adapted into his own crazy way. So in a way, this is definitely a fantasy
Yeah,
RPG.
his backflip's really sweet.
Yeah, yeah, right. When he does the backflip to get back into position, it's awesome.
Mm. because yeah, I was really struck by how confusingly Breath of Fire 4's east is our west,
Oh, right.
and yeah,
Yeah,
and our west is yeah, vice versa. So like basically Asia is in the west and Europe and America are in the east for Breath of Fire. But
right.
it's very balanced. Like it does feel very eastern overall. And there's obviously two halves. So the home kingdom that you're in, like where Windia is definitely more medieval inspired, but there are more barren desert regions than I probably was more used to at that time. There's more and then obviously when you get over to the Folu Empire and the Western Kingdom, that's obviously far more Asian inspired and really cool looking,
Yeah,
but it's definitely an interesting turn. And I think Breath of Fire as a series likes to stick to the kind of differences. Like they tend to do the Western Eastern kind of thing, but I don't ever remember it as prominently in 3 as I do in 4. There's always two different kingdoms that are different, but this seems to be the most prominent split between the two.
yeah. I don't remember a split in architecture like that in Breath of Fire
Hmm.
2. There was the Kingdom of the Frog People, which was sort of like, you know, like Louis the 14th France, and the Monkey People were in a had a kingdom that was sort of a little bit more Eastern inspired. And Windia is in that game, and Nina is she's different in that she's exiled from Windia because she's a Windian with black wings, which is a harbinger of doom.
Yeah.
Um, but like I remember the different kingdoms in Breath of Fire 2 having these different aesthetics and different feels, even though you don't visit necessarily all of them for all characters. But it's definitely a two opposing forces, maybe a yin and yang thing, like I suggested earlier, for the eastern and western kingdoms here, and like the desert in between them is almost like the modern Middle East and Silk Road, like the east, like the Far East and the medieval West separated by a desert region of merchants and traders, which
Yeah.
is a neat little thing. But it's the difference in architecture and design is something that is you see in other RPGs, but I think is executed pretty well. It makes when you visit the West for the first time near the end of Chapter 1, it really feels foreign
Yeah.
and threatening in a way. Even though well, let's jump into the plot a little bit because for the most of Chapter 1. Nina happens upon Ryu. She's trying to help Cray repair their ship so they can look for Nina's sister. And so you go around the desert region for most of Chapter 1, and eventually you transport to the Western Kingdom, where you hang around in one building for about 15 minutes, and then you're sent back. That was a little weird to me. There was no cap off boss fight, no denouement. It's like, oh
Mm.
nope, you crashed at the wrong time. Time to get out of here. And then sort of chapter 2 starts. It did that seem a little bit jarring to you?
It was very odd. And if I remember correctly, a couple of hours beforehand, Ryu had a dream, didn't he, about that
Yes.
sequence? Yeah. So it was really jarring because I thought where the dream cuts off, I thought that's where you're going to go into a big boss fight, something's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen, and obviously you're going to come out. No, you literally get found by Yuna, I think his name is, confusingly, the, the scientist or whatever he is.
Oh shoot, I'm not going to be able to remember character names other than the main party.
I remember him specifically because he has a bit of a reputation among Breath of Fire fans for being a bit of an arse. So yeah, you might want to keep an eye out for him in future chapters. But
He did have
yeah,
the
I
look
was
of the evil chancellor or evil advisor kind of guy.
yeah, definitely. If there's ever an antagonist in this game, it's more him. Like the character you hate the most is probably going to be him. But yeah, like when that dream ended, I thought, oh god, I'm going to have a boss fight at that point. And when I got to that bit, I thought, oh, it's this bit, and everything played out exactly the same. And obviously, it didn't cut out after the curtain, and then you just get carted away. And I just thought, oh my god, like really, that was the end of the chapter, and it was kind of. It wasn't. I wouldn't say it was like a it wasn't disappointing, I'd say, but it was definitely kind of unusual because having finished chapter 2, that does end with a big boss fight. So,
Okay, well that's something for me to look forward to then, because I was a little disappointed because I thought that,
hmm,
um, I mean, when that happened, when you cross over to the other continent, I'm like, oh shoot, this is probably chapter 2 is going to start soon because this feels like a new place and a new setting and and a
Hmm.
sort of like the start of another chapter. That was logical to me, but instead it just sort of cuts off early, and you're sent back to the same era you were before.
Yeah, they do drag it out because you're not in the Western Kingdom either by the end of chapter two, and
Right,
I'm just getting there about a third of the way through chapter three or halfway through chapter three. So it is a big tease and it is frustrating, I would say, because the only ways you get to experience the Western Kingdom is through Faux Liu so far. And
right.
even then, only snippets because I don't think you've experienced any towns at this point, have we? You've been
You,
on
you go to the border town
yes.
right at the end of chapter one. After you cross the bridge, but it hardly counts as a town.
Hmm.
It's like two buildings, but and you don't see that much of Folu because he's sort of in uh uh the same mountainous area for the three scenes you get from him in chapter one. Let's go back a little bit. Uh, Folu is another dragon person like Ryu. He wakes up from a long sleep or in what looks like an elaborate temple or tomb, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
In
tomb.
yeah, in the West, and he's immediately accosted by an imperial mage and a bunch of imperial soldiers. And they say that he's basically the original emperor of the Western Empire, and it's
Yes.
even named after him. And he's woken up, I guess, to take it back, or it's his awakening was foretold, or at least known by the Empire, and so now he's slowly gaining his powers back and fighting off people from his own empire that he founded 1,000 years ago,
Hmm.
and mentioned that he won't get to full strength until he reunites with his quote unquote other half, which is almost certainly Ryu, right? Am I
Hmm.
mostly correct
Yep,
so
that's
far?
all correct.
All right,
You are
but
pretty much correct.
yeah, it's I don't think it's really that much of a stretch because they've said enough in the game that it's either very easy to read between the lines or they say it outright. And
Oh yeah, it's easy to read between the lines
mm,
because you just really have to put two and two together. Like Ryu, the minute you know, really, as if you do one of Folu's dragon transformations, and you see that they're basically exactly the same
mm,
as Ryu's. Yeah, it's really obvious from the get go, but I don't think it's meant to be a secret. For definite.
yeah, but basically you get a segment to play as Folu every few hours, like when you rest at an inn or something, or are doing mandatory traveling in a with the main party, and the Folu segments are so cool.
I know.
He's like level 70. He's strong as hell. All of his moves are stylish. He's beating up dragons on his own. Oh
Yeah.
man, Folu's great. I get like I know he's basically a villain, because he's a former evil emperor trying to take his kingdom back, but I can't help but want to root for the bad guy a little bit here.
No, definitely. I mean, I feel exactly the same. Like jumping from a level 5 character to a level 65 character is really cool. He's so overpowered. He gets double attacks as well. Like you've had all this like these turn-based combat where each character only gets one go, but Folu, no, he gets two slashes
Is
and basically
unique to Is that unique to Folu, or do you like get double attacks if your speed stat is high enough, or do you need like an
no.
item?
So it's not unique to him, but certain katanas give you a double attack at some certain
For
points in the
For
game.
Skias, or for Ryu and
Yes.
Skias?
I think definitely for Skius, Rio might be able to equip a couple of them, but
Okay.
yeah. You are rooting for Folu because regardless of if he's the evil emperor, it doesn't feel like the current empire's guards or soldiers are doing it to protect their kingdom. And I'm pretty sure they say, we want to capture you, but they don't say it because they're scared of him taking over. They say it because they're scared of his power. And I don't feel negatively about Folu because there's something slimy about the soldier, basically, the
Yeah,
captain.
yeah.
Ugh, I
That sort of wizened old sage looking dude that is
John.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's trying to stop him. It's basically that I mean them wanting to fight him because they're scared of his power only communicates how powerful Folu is and makes him seem cooler in the eyes of the player, at least to me. And
Yeah.
and it's really fun switching between what's basically a normal RPG party that is getting stronger throughout the game and uncovering mysteries as they get deeper into the plot of the game, with this guy who is like almost like skipping several chapters ahead to the end and is already having an end game level conflict as his daily life. It's a really really cool narrative choice. Maybe it's not the first time there's been a game like this, but I am enjoying it very much and get like maybe bouncing my seat a little bit when I switch to a faux lube chapter.
It's a shame there aren't more of them because a lot of them are just like 30 second to a minute cutscenes, but there are maybe three or four between chapter one and chapter two. Cooler enemies. He gets some of the cooler subplots. He's just interwoven in a really nice way, and I do really, really like. I can't think of any other major RPGs that make you swap between the villain and the hero or the antagonist and whatever. But yeah, I just really enjoy doing his segments because it makes me feel really overpowered for a brief moment, and then you have to do this really not easy boss fights, I would say, because they tend to have the opposite element to you anyway. But it's
Mm.
really cool when you get that far. You get a special move. I can't remember what it's called, but basically it does damage relative to the amount of HP Folu has. And when he turns into a dragon, he's got like 9-9 pretty much. And this move does something like 10 or 15,000 damage a hit,
Oh boy.
stacking damage. It does like 2,000 damage a hit.
So it scales with his current HP and
Yeah,
not with how low it is.
that's it does go down depending on the difference between the max and the minimum. So yeah,
Okay,
so if it's
it's not like frog squash. It's like the opposite of frog squash.
oh no, it is like frog squash. You're right. So the lower your HP, the less damage it does. So
Okay,
it's the
okay, all
opposite.
right. It's like the ultimate weapon, right? Yeah,
It's the ultimate weapon. Yeah.
that's what I was trying to think of. So okay,
Yeah.
that's I have not found that move yet, but it is so much fun getting to like play around with end game toys with like on occasion when most of the game is with a relatively normal party. I enjoy the Folu stuff a lot, and
Mm.
I'm assuming that he's going to eventually clash with the main party. I would love for him to join them like a like late game like a like Magus and Chrono Trigger or something, but I
That would-
sort of doubt they're gonna. I sort of doubt that's what will happen. My guess is that they'll fight, but I haven't gotten that far
mm.
yet.
No. They probably will fight. Yeah. But
Well,
I
you
think
say
it
this
would be
as
good
someone
in a
who's played the
party.
game already.
But I could, yeah, exactly. Oh no, it's not gonna, he's going to join totally. No, it would be really cool if he joined though. Yeah, he's
Mm-hmm.
definitely the antagonist. There is a part at the end of, when near the end of chapter two, where you get the whole kind of, you find out that the other half of Ryu is the Folu
Mm.
Emperor, and then they're like, we can't let you join together. Have to
Sure. That.
decide whether to go and meet him and kill him or whether to rejoin them. So that's the kind of direction the
Hmm.
plot ends up going in, rather than, let's say, the Alina, weirdly enough. So the main story of chapter one and half of chapter two ends up being the subplot for the rest of the game.
Interesting.
But
Man,
like Ryu,
I'm gonna go straight back to playing this when we're done recording this podcast because th- they're setting the table for some interesting plot stuff later, and both with just the hints that you get throughout the game, including the weird frog lady singing to you at the beach, and these Folu segments. It's a lot of interesting. I don't know if it's really foreshadowing, but there's interesting stuff that you can sort of see happening later, and I'm not going to call this one of the great RPG plots of the PS1 era because there are many better ones, but I'm enjoying it as I'm playing it, and
it
it has enough hooks that to keep me interested.
it's a good. I think it does what it needs to do. It's like, maybe I'd say Chrono Trigger as a comparison, but Chrono Trigger's plot is actually quite not complicated, but it's quite rich. This is kind of the snippet of SNES RPG stories in that it's fairly standard, but there's enough to keep you going. And it's not, I don't ever find myself going, oh, but why doesn't this happen? And why doesn't this happen? And things. But there's stuff that you can see that is going to happen, both mechanically and story wise as well. So there's reason for you to carry on playing for definite.
one thing, scaling it back a little bit again, just comparing Breath of Fire 4 to Breath of Fire 2 and 3. Uh, do you get the idea that maybe they ran out of money or ran out of time on developing this game? Just because a few things, I think we mentioned this a little bit before we started recording, but a few things in Breath of Fire 4 seem like either cost-cutting measures or they ran out of time. Like, first of all, there's not a proper world map. You go,
Mhm.
there's sort of a, you follow dots between spots like I don't know, like the Final Fantasy Tactics world map or something. While Breath of Fire 3, I remember having a pretty rich, robust world map with even hidden stuff
Yeah.
on it. And Breath of Fire 2 was basically a normal SNES RPG that had a world map with continents that you would travel between and everything. Um, so this doesn't have a proper world map when other games had sort of interesting world maps, and the plot seems to move in ways that are a little choppy and surprising, at least in chapter 1, because
Hmm.
you're sort of just hurtling from place to place, and the transitions between settings seem abrupt. Like I mentioned how I was disappointed how you cross to the other continent and not much happens, and then you're back in jail in the first continent. It that seemed like it happened really fast. And I think if this game maybe had a bigger budget or more time to develop, I wonder if they would have had more scenes or more locations to fill in the gaps a little bit. Because and also dungeons are short. Like
Yes.
one thing that I don't like about Breath of Fire 3 and why I stopped playing it was because uh, I don't remember what the dungeon I stopped at, but I remember one early dungeon was this frickin' dude's house that you're just in for hours and hours. And the dungeon I stopped in was I stopped because it was lengthy and I lost steam. But in Breath of Fire 4, every dungeon takes 5 minutes.
It's weird, isn't it?
It
Especially for a game from that era where
yeah.
not necessarily the dungeons are long, but there are, and like they're kind of the right length. They're a good length. So coming off the back of playing Chrono Cross and a bit of Final Fantasy IX,
Mhm.
those dungeons probably take you maybe 20 minutes, half an hour at the most if they're really, really long. These are like 5, 10 minute jobs, apart from maybe one that was slightly frustrating for me, but that's maybe to do with Breath of Fire's kind of 3 and 4 is definitely quirk of having the camera almost in the corner of a room
Oh yeah, no,
rather
no,
than behind or above.
yeah, the camera is a pain in the rear, and the like visibility around corners and near and close to your character can be a major
Ugh.
factor. The playing hide and seek in that desert town took me probably 30 minutes
Oh,
when it should have taken me 10 because one freaking kid
yeah.
was in a corner that I couldn't see unless I was in a specific camera view. But that aside, the dungeons in Breath of Fire 4 feel like there's maybe one puzzle mechanic, like figuring out the different cells at the cellar of that town,
Yes, that's
or
right.
figuring out the bridges and sluices in the dam, or like there's like maybe one little puzzle or task to solve,
Hmm.
and then you're out of there in 10 minutes. Where in Breath of Fire 3, I remember the dungeons being maybe slightly too long. Wherein, like you said, other RPGs of the PS1 era, I'm used to having dungeons that are, a tower or a dungeon that will be 30 plus minutes. So I
Yeah.
wonder if Breath of Fire 4 had to rush a little bit through plot points and through dungeons because they were limited by time or budget. I don't know if that's true or not, but because it feels like it moves very quickly and has some RPG elements that feel short or rushed, makes me wonder if that was the case.
Potentially. I mean, it's not something I've ever looked into, but I do remember thinking at times, like, they say the plot is rushed. Essentially, the whole of chapter 1 is just getting parts for your ship so you can go over to the other continent.
And you
But
end up
it's
not
such,
not using the ship anyway.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, like you just jump from thing to thing. Like 1 minute you're getting ship parts. Oh, you need to go to this village. Oh, you can't go that way because of the hex. What's the hex? You never have that explained to you at this point in the plot.
Right.
Very briefly, but you just told you can't go into it basically, and you have to use Urshin, and then that kind of vanishes behind you. And the hex does pop up again at the beginning of chapter 3,
And
but
well,
then
they
it's
mention it at the end of chapter 1 when you're in the village
yeah,
that's right at the base of the tower. They mention that the big cannon there fires hexes.
That's correct, yeah. So, but
Hmm.
they don't ever like fully explain it, and they don't ever go
Correct.
into a lot of depth. So, yeah, you're just jumping between town and town. You're not really explain like there's no real kind of because when they come back to meet with Cray, they've got Urshin with them, but they never really introduce Urshin. It's just like, oh, Cray, I'm back, and she hugs like Nina hugs Cray, and it's like all happy and well to do and everything, and
And it's
nothing really
and
comes
Cray's
out.
like, oh, what's up? This guy's for you. He turns into dragons. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. There's no kind of surprise about it, which is it is really jarring. And you brought up the world map. They it's a really strange system they use because I'd forgotten this game didn't have a world map, so it was quite a bit of a shock when I came to like some old torn smudged map and with a dotted path basically. And then when the question marks come up, so the idea between Breath of Fire 4 on Breath of Fire 4's map is that you walk from point A to point B basically. But sometimes you'll get like an interaction mark partway through and your character will stop and you can press X and you'll
Right.
go into that area where it's just like an open desert or forest with maybe one treasure chest in it. But if you go out anyway, you'll come back to the map and you'll just carry
Hmm.
on walking down. It's not
Yeah,
like it's an
I have
exit.
accidentally exited those exclamation point random spots in the map many times, and one of them was completely empty except for a sign in the middle, and the sign said fishing spot to the east or something. And then
Yeah.
when I got out of there, a little fishing spot opened up on the maps. But it's like that's a whole lot of empty. That seems like
Mm.
that seems like something that in Breath of Fire 3 they would have had their big map and a tiny sign on the map that would have indicated where the fishing spot was, and but everything would have been represented on the map already. The the Breath of Fire 4 world map feels like it feels empty and disjointed, which are words I think I've used many times already in this podcast. But it
But it
and as someone who loves a good world map, I find it one of the weaker parts of the game.
yeah, for definite. I'm with you on the world map craze and that. Sure.
I mean,
But
you and I both love Skies of Arcadia, which is a an all time
which
great world map. And so when I get a world map that makes me feel like I'm exploring and feel like
mm,
feel the spirit of adventure rushing through my veins,
mm.
I get really excited. But this is not the case.
Yeah, I'm not one of these people who are like, oh my God, like I'd wear a world maps in this day and age. Like I understand they're not part of a
Sometimes I'm
maybe
that guy. Sometimes
sometimes,
I am.
yes. Oh, for definite. And this is one of those games where I am because I mean it's of the era where there's still quite a big part of RPG culture. Like Final Fantasy X came out maybe a year afterwards, and that didn't have a proper. It had a world map, but you just teleported around it, and not until the very end of the game. But like it was still a regular occurrence. Like a lot of like Tales of the Abyss had a world map, and that came out in 2006, which we also played earlier this year. And it's
Mm.
like it feels really disjointed. I think is a good word for it because there's no like sense of destination or journey when you're walking on one of those kind of dotted lines. It's like you're walking around and it could take you 4 or 5 days. If you're walking around on a world map, you can kind of relate to the amount of time it might take. But when you're walking on a dotted map, then it's completely different. One thing I do like though about the world map is you can camp and save anywhere, and that's really nice and really useful. So
Oh yeah.
there's that, I suppose, and it's free. You don't have to buy tents, which is really nice. But one other thing about it being kind of rushed is I don't want to knock the battle system because the battle system is really nice, old school turn based RPGs, and it's got some really cool elements in it that are new and fresh to Breath of Fire. But it uses so many old things from Breath of Fire 3. So I don't remember if the game ever explains it to you. It probably does because there's like a tutorial character in towns. But there is in Breath of Fire 3, you could learn skills by defending, and if a character or an enemy attacks you with a certain skill, you'll learn that skill.
Hmm.
Breath of Fire 4 skill system is exactly the same. There's no difference in it. You obviously learn stuff by leveling up, but there's nothing new about it. And then you have to go back to the tent, read it in the book, and you can reassign it or you can like move it around and things like
I have a question for you. To reassign
that.
skills, you need an item called Aurum. And
Yes.
I didn't quite realize this at first, and I had, I think, 3 Aurum, and tried to
Yeah.
move skills around and accidentally spent all 3 of it, just like unequipping and
Oh.
re-equipping skills a couple times. And and I ended up with skills probably not where I wanted them.
Yeah.
I don't think Urshan has anything on my team right now, which is too bad because one of the best things about Urshan is that she gets all of her MP or SP or whatever it is back instantly,
She does.
which is great. But so is Aurum a problematic resource to collect? Because will I be able to get a lot of it later? Is basically what I'm
Not
asking.
not loads of it. It's not rare, but it's not common. So it's kind of in that you'll sometimes get it. You just need to look in bookcases and things like that. See, on the opposite fly of things, I've not spent any time guarding and getting skills or even practicing with masters and things like that
I
because
I've only found one master. I'm not sure if, and it's another thing that's returning from three, the master system, but it doesn't seem to
yeah,
affect your stats quite as heavily this time
no, it doesn't. So
because
they give you some kind of special skill, but that's it. They only benefit that one character. You can have a master on like three different characters, but yeah, it's just like I don't know.
well, I mean, the thing with Masters in Breath of Fire 3, I didn't get that far in that game. I only found the first three Masters, maybe. But they change your stats a lot.
They do.
And in Breath of Fire 4, they mentioned that you get a skill, but I think it was like 1 point up in one stat and 1 point down in another, which is way different from how it was in 3. But
Yeah.
I actually have been getting skills pretty regularly. Whenever I'm at a new dungeon and there's new enemies, I'll spend the first couple turns guarding every turn to see if they teach me anything. And in one case, uh, and I forget where it was, but enemies were using a spell called Frost, which is a little simple
Yeah.
ice spell. And I remember that I learned a simple fire spell, Burn, right near the beginning of the game. So I'm like, oh sweet, I'll get it. I'll get this ice spell. And
Mm.
I guarded every turn for like 8 turns, and they used Frost on more than half of those turns. And I decided, okay, I guess I'm not allowed to learn Frost. But so sometimes the system and a similar thing happened when there was cockroaches that used a skill called Jump, and I was sure that I could learn Jump from them, but that was also a no go. So.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's
so it's not always easy to identify what skills can be used and which skills
yes, it's
can't be used. But I have been trying to take advantage of it a little bit, and
that's
also
cool.
the combo system comes back from Breath of
Yeah,
Fire 3.
yeah, that's a really cool feature. I really am a big fan of that because you can combo skills, spells, healing spells, and it's really, really handy to use. Which also, they do this in three as well, don't they? So if you use a fire spell and a wind spell, it will turn into a fire. I want to say fire wind spell. It's a thunder spell, isn't it, or something like that? It's a
Yeah,
different
fire
element.
fire and wind becomes thunder, and earth and fire becomes like eruption stuff.
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
then fire and wind becomes I think literally fire wind.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, and it's really cool. I really like that. Because you one of the ways to get your master's stats up and improve the boosts a little bit is by well, I think the first master especially, you have to do these combos. So the first upgrade I think is a 5 hit combo, and then the next one's like a 10 hit combo, and he'll give you kind of benefits if you work on that. So that's one way that kind of boosts that side of the game, I would say. But yeah, it does use a lot of elements from Breath of Fire 3, which is kind of disappointing, but at the same time, they kind of work still.
And it's a versatile
You
enough
also,
system though, because like
yeah,
your characters learn their own things, and I think you could probably get away with not learning any skills or very many skills, because
yeah,
none of the ones I've learned seem so powerful that I couldn't continue without them. They're
no.
they're all right. They're good. I appreciate the level of customization that I'm allowed to use.
Yeah, and I'd say I've only learnt one or two spells really, but I've never felt the need to use them, which is also good because it means if you don't figure this cool thing out, then it doesn't matter because you're not going to need it. But kind of moving aside from this game is not a rush job, but there's elements that have been reused, recycled, and things have kind of been skipped over.
Hmm.
Breath of Fire, the one thing about Breath of Fire's 4 battle system, which is new, is the fact that when you have more than three characters, you can swap them in on the fly whenever
Yes,
you
it's
want, and
awesome.
I love it. And it is every RPG should do it, every single one.
You can switch them in on the fly, and when they're not in your party, they gain back some MP or SP or whatever it is every turn.
Yep,
So
and
it encourages you to use your whole team. It encourages you to use skills because if you're like me, sometimes you hoard your usable items or hoard MP for some boss battle that may or may not come eventually. But with
yeah,
this, with an easy way to restore your spell power, you can just by swapping people in and out, you can use your best skills almost whenever you want. And Urshan is particularly good at that since she has the rare talent of like healing back all of her SP in one turn.
Yeah, it's good. The only thing about that is that obviously if you've used it in battle and you come out of battle, it doesn't stay with you. So if you use all of Urshan's MP or SP, I think it's called, if you
Is it
leave
SP in this
battle.
game? There's in the different games, it's been MP,
TP.
SP, TP in the Tales games, PP in Earthbound.
Oh
Um,
God.
it's I'm sure it's AP in at least a couple other games. It
It
gets
may
a
well
little
be.
complicated. So sometimes I just always call it MP, no matter what it actually is. It's
Yeah.
I've played too many RPGs, Alana.
Me too. Me too. But yeah, so it's a little frustrating that you can stick someone you can use like I don't know, turn into one of Ryu's dragons, then take him, put him in the back. But then when you leave battle, he's back to where he's not restored his SP. It's
Mm.
still kind of 20 down. But it makes sense because then you don't have to use them in items in battle as well. So I am like you, I'm a bit of a hoarder for items and things.
Oh yeah,
Things always have to
and
go
for
in
the final
multiples.
boss, you just have a stack of elixirs that you've never touched,
And I don't touch them still. It's like
right?
never. Um But yeah, the swapping mechanic is really awesome. Also, certain characters have support skills in battle when you put them in the back row. So
Oh
Urshan will
right. Hmm.
sometimes, yeah, Urshan will sometimes randomly attack an enemy. Nina will randomly heal your party as well at certain times if you drop down too low. So it really, really does encourage you to use everybody, and everybody gains the same experience at all times. So it's like actively encouraging you to use everybody because everyone's got their pros and cons. Like Ryu's got not great defense. Skius hasn't got very good defense at all, but he's really quick. Neither is Nina. But Krea's really powerful and he's slow. Urshin's got a low hit rate, but when she does hit, she is really powerful. So it is about balance, and it's a really, really cool feature that not many games do. Like, I don't understand why you wouldn't want to utilize your entire party.
Yeah, FF10 lets you switch people out at any
Yeah,
time, and you can see how the turn rate and like the turn order is affected whenever you switch someone in and out, and it made
yeah,
combat in FF10, which is otherwise mostly normal turn-based combat, seem like it flowed so quickly
yeah,
and
really.
allowed you to use especially early in the game when everyone has a specific strength and weakness against a certain enemy type or element type, and it encourages switching based on your situation and based on the enemy all the time, and it
Hmm.
feels great in both Breath of Fire 4 and Final Fantasy 10, and I don't know why people why more games don't do it. Maybe it's because it's it makes it less challenging if you have this much freedom, but
I
uh,
guess so. The only other game I can think of right away that you can do it with is Star Ocean 4, which is an action RPG. So you can literally swap anybody in from the menu in the middle of battle, and you can swap between anyone in the party in the middle of battle and control whoever you want whenever you want. So that's similar. But yeah, I just don't.
in the Paper Mario games, you can swap your characters in and out.
Yes, you can.
Sometimes it'll usually cost you a turn or half a turn to do it, but there's items you can equip that let you do it without wasting a turn. And but that's another case where that's part of gameplay, putting the right party members in and out for different situations, and it feels great when you do it. I don't know why it's not more common.
No. And it's really well done in Breath of Fire 4 because
Hmm.
you can use everybody and anybody. And also, the way that battles work is it's like a really, really old RPG, or like Skies of Arcadia. So you tell everybody what to do first.
Mm.
And it's not actually based on their speed stat, it's based on the speed stat and the order that they're in. So the
Yeah,
character in the front left will always go first. But it also then takes into consideration their speed stat. So if you've got Nina on the top left, she's probably going to go first all the time. But if you put Cray in first, then he'll go first out of your three, but he'll most likely go last out of the enemies. Or he'll
yeah.
go after all the enemies' turns. So don't put Cray in the front ever, really. Always put Nina or Ryu or Skius in because they're the three quickest. And then just juggle around after that because it doesn't really matter too much. But
That's useful when you're setting up combos because
mm,
I would always I had burn equipped to Ryu, and when you cast burn and then Nina casts her sever spell, you get a nice fire wind that affects the entire enemy. So when I was messing around with turn order, I would always have Ryu to the left of Nina, whether Ryu was first and Nina was second, or Ryu was second and Nina was third, because that let me set up the Fire Wind spell basically whenever I wanted to.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
just little things like that. This combat system is exploitable. I don't think this is a very challenging RPG so far, but
No.
there's enough cool twists to what is otherwise an old school system that I've definitely enjoyed it throughout.
Mm. Yeah, and it takes because I was always worried that that combo system there might have been an element of randomness to it, and sometimes it doesn't work, and it depends on whether the enemies go first or not, or whether you cast the spells in the right order. But as long as you've got the right character with the right spell going first, then you'll always get a combo. So you can always guarantee how ridiculously powerful that attack's going to be. Because Nina's really overpowered in the beginning of the game. Like, her magic is ridiculous. And if you get spells, they cost like nothing either. So you're kind of just like playing around. You'll get some combos and
Yeah,
you'll win most fights.
she has a lot of MP, and there's a lot of enemies that are either strong against physical or strong against magic. So against these,
Hmm.
these big heavy armored things, she will just absolutely tear them up when nothing that the rest of your team has will affect them. So
Yeah.
she's very very effective at the beginning, and I guess maybe is the sixth character better, at least okay at magic, because otherwise it's a pretty physical heavy team.
Yeah, so the sixth character is a balance between both, but she comes equipped with every second and third level fire and wind.
Ooh, neat.
She's got every second level fire, earth, and wind spell, but she's got a third level fire spell as well.
Earth, wind, and fire. You say?
Earth, wind, and fire, I say.
Excellent.
Hmm.
So let's groove tonight.
Oh yeah.
So
Uh,
let's see. We've touched on a lot of the first half of Breath of Fire so far. I'm trying to search for other topics that we absolutely must address in our first episode. Oh, the abundance of mini games.
oh wow. Yeah, I forgot. This is something else I'd completely blanked out. For every place you go to, Breath of Fire has a mini game for your entertainment, I think. It's not ridiculous because they're not hard. That's the nice thing about them, and they're not like I don't know, they're not difficult, and they're just like little obstructions, and sometimes I'm just a bit like I don't really want to do this, but I have to do it. But a lot of them don't take very long. So I can only really remember some later ones which are a little bit better, but
I don't
there's
know.
the
I felt like a superhero when I loaded all 10 crates onto the ship with 2 seconds left in the timer.
Oh, that was a night. That one was a bit fiddly because then I'd put two crates down, and then I suddenly realized you had to get bonus points. You had to put them in the slot that it was
Oh
telling you
yeah.
to put
Oh,
them.
I'm well aware. I got all the bonus points. It was awesome.
Well done. I was not
I
paying
was born to
attention.
be a video game dock worker, I guess,
You're born to be a shit worker. Yeah,
or I
video
guess a
game shits.
stevedore is the term. I've seen the second season of The
Ah.
Wire. Uh, So,
Yes.
but yeah, there's a mini game with almost every plot point. They range from playing hide and seek with children to working at a
Oh,
dock to
there's a warehouse one. You know the Tales games
oh
love
god,
their warehouse
yeah, god,
ones.
the stupid warehouse things. I got annoyed with the warehouses and Tales of the Abyss playing earlier this year. I think I only did the first two of those, and there's at least four. Um,
Yeah.
God, the chocobo hot and cold digging with the dog in the desert.
Oh God, yeah.
That
That's
one took me. I actually used a lot of gold figuring that out because it was I couldn't get things positioned exactly right.
I used a couple of bits, but yeah, I was just they seem to love them, and there's just so many of them. Like literally, even it doesn't die down when you get to the second half. It's like full force. So kind of a bit of a spoiler, and I'm gonna do this. When you
Mm.
get a sandflyer eventually,
Okay,
every
yeah, that makes
time
sense.
every time you have to use it, you have to do some kind of not a racing mini game, but you have to control it round a path.
Oh no,
Um,
Alana,
yeah,
is this kind of like a gummy ship?
no, because you don't have to
Okay,
attack
good.
anything,
Because
so it's not like a gummy ship.
I don't have very many positive feelings about gummy ships, Alana.
You don't
To the surprise of no one.
you don't need to have positive feelings about gummy ships in one for Kingdom Hearts 1. Kingdom
All
Hearts
right.
2, they're better. But yeah, they're not like gummy ships. There's no enemies. If you go off the course, which you can, it just puts you back to where you were, and there's no punishment for it. But yeah, but mini games do get a relevance later on in the plot, and
Okay.
It's to do with one of Ryu's skills, and we'll go into that when we get into the next episode because, as you might notice, as a hint, Ryu only has one dragon form for
Oh yeah,
most.
and I'm
He
aware
does.
that from Breath of Fire 2 that you don't get to just stay in as one version of as one dragon the whole game. No,
No, you don't. Nope, you get more dragon skills and mini games,
right on.
especially fishing, come into play.
Oh god, there's so much fishing in this game. I am the worst Breath of Fire 4 fisherman. I
Oh,
I
I don't mind.
I lost all of my bait the first time I tried. It's like well, I hope I don't have to do this mandatorily later because I am useless trying to catch fish in this game.
Oh wow. See, I'm usually I hate RPG fishing. Like famously hate RPG fishing. Breath of Fire 4's is okay.
No, no,
Like I
I
can
don't
do
think
it.
I don't think the game is I don't think it's a bad fishing mini game. I'm just useless at it.
No. I'm useless at most of them. Like I hated Niers. I was absolutely terrible at it. But they're not mandatory and they're never mandatory, but they become useful for said extra skills, obviously extra dragon forms that Ryu
Oh,
gets.
extra dragon forms. Oh man,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
get good then if dragon forms are at stake here.
You don't get them for it, so you get them wandering around or as part of
Oh,
the
but
plot.
maybe there's items that fuel or enhance them.
They level them up,
I
correct. Yeah.
see. Okay, all right,
Yeah.
that makes sense. That still is gonna incentivize me to try fishing because of course I
Mm,
want to transform into bigger, stronger, cooler dragons. Of course I do.
yes. I don't know how many dragons you've seen throughout the journey. I think you've probably only seen the sand dragon and the mud dragon. Did you get
Yeah,
them?
yes. What do you mean get
But
them?
they are you can get them eventually.
Oh, but
Or
I didn't skip something by not getting them now, did I?
no.
Okay,
No, no, no.
okay,
You don't get any dragons until the end of chapter 2, the
okay.
beginning of chapter 3.
That all right.
So
That sounds good.
what I was going to say is that I really like how bizarre and unique the designs are for these dragons
Yeah.
because they're not like traditional. So like the mud dragon is like a big snake, isn't he? Really, he's
And,
like a
and
big.
you can like see his skeleton through a gel,
Mm.
almost like almost like the Pokemon Reuniques, where it's like
We're
where
talking about this a lot.
we did talk about that the other day in privately, but like it's almost like it's like a skeleton suspended in gel almost, and it which makes it
Mm.
look sort of alien. The mud dragon now I'm talking about, and but these are not traditional, four or two legs, two wings kind of dragons. They look really unique and different from one another, which I think is cool. I'm excited to see more Breath of Fire 4 dragons.
Yeah, it gives you a really ethereal feel to them. So if you've watched the opening movie, you have seen one other dragon, and that is the Wind Dragon, who is like reminds me of a flying Milotic, basically. He's just white and green. But they
It's just staying to our Pokemon comparisons.
yeah, exactly. But the nice thing is that going back to the Asian theme is they all have Asian style names as well. So I can't remember the name of the Wind Dragon. But they do have some really, really cool designs, and I'm really looking forward to seeing some more of them because I've got the water, wind, mud, and sand dragon so far. So yeah, excited to pick up some extra ones. Also, have you seen Folu's dragon or like his kind, not his dragon transformation, but where he like flies? I don't think that's
Yeah,
where you are at the moment.
well, you do see that because in the last cutscene in Chapter 1, you see
That's right.
he defeats one of the masked dragons that the Empire has, and then turns into one himself and flies away. So there's a brief chase sequence where it almost looks
Mm,
like a dragonfly, but instead of the insect body, it's sort of like a more of a snake-like body
mm, yeah,
with sort of shorter wings, but they're two pairs of wings.
yeah. It
Um,
is really cool.
yeah, no, it's a cool interpretation, and it's not like a traditional Western-looking dragon.
Yeah, which is really neat, and I really like them. Um,
So
but
yeah,
yeah, I guess
dragon
that's my point on dragons.
transformations, more plot machinations, uh, more drunken dogs, a sixth character I haven't met yet because I'm a little
Mm.
more behind than I was planning to for this episode. Where else do we have to go before we sign off?
Um, I think we're almost done. Just kind of You don't even get the sixth character until chapter 3,
Oh,
so
okay.
you're still a little while
I
off
was
of
not
getting
aware of
him.
that.
She just kind of jumps in, but things do pick up a little bit. So after Windia, you do tend to get more, like a lot more happens and a lot of things make sense and the story shifts a little bit, and suddenly you realize that this whole looking for Alina thing is not the main crux of the story anymore, because you have a boy that turns into dragons with you. That's way more important than a princess who's been kidnapped, obviously, and his like evil emperor twin who's cooler than him, sadly, and speaks in really ye old English, like.
I like Folu's archaic speech.
But mm,
I never found it to be a problem.
oh, it's not a problem at all. It's very enjoyable, especially seeing as he's like, I don't want to say he's Asian, but he's designed to be an Asian emperor. So
Yeah,
I don't expect him to speak like that. I was expecting, I guess, traditional, but not like almost not medieval. But like you said, you coined it perfectly, really.
yeah. It's like oh shoot, it's like Lo Pan and Big Trouble in Little China, which just makes it even cooler in my book.
Oh, big trouble in Breath of Fire 4.
Oh, Big Trouble in Little Folu.
Oh,
But I think that about does it for episode 114 of Retro Encounter. Thank you for listening, listeners. Alana and I are really excited to continue playing this and talk about it even more in 2 weeks, because part 2 is coming in 2 weeks and not next week. Next week is going to be a special year in review 2017 episode for Retro Encounter. We have not recorded it yet, but it's going to be a panel of 6 trying not to talk over each other across 3 continents. So good luck, us.
yeah, good luck. Across how many different time zones as well? Like four?
I think it's only 3 time zones
Oh, you're in Port.
yeah, Peter, Marcos, and I are all on the East Coast. So
Ah,
but yeah, Michigan's weird. Michigan has 2 time zones, and Peter's on the eastern half. So it's good.
great.
It's only 3 time zones, but it's also 3 continents. So, oh boy.
Ooh.
And after that, I think it's okay for me to announce this. I won't say exactly what games yet, but in January we're going to be playing 3 different games for our special game journals. Each of them is going to be an indie game that's a little shorter and has a different panel for each game. We did a similar thing in, I believe, February or March of 2016, where we played Juniper's Knot, To the
Go
Moon, and Gone Home. And
on.
we had a lot of fun doing that. So we're doing sort of a sequel to that, playing 3 different indie games, each one of them having their own episode. But I won't say which games those are yet. I'll tell you next week, I guess. But if you want to reach us directly, listeners, you should do so via email at retro@rpgfan.com. Go onto the rpgfan.com message boards, visit the RPG Fan Facebook page or the RPG Fancom Twitter. Throw thoughts and reactions to them, and someone will respond, probably. Please review us on iTunes or any various podcast listening venues that you have. We love feedback. We love 5-star reviews the most, but please just be honest and tell us what you think. So, Alana, if a listener wants to get in contact with you, how should they do so?
So the best way to get in touch with me is probably on Twitter. You can find me on @Alana Hagues. As I said at the beginning, I'm diving Falcons on the board. I'm also diving Falcons on our what's it called, Discord, on our new Discord,
Oh, right,
so
yes.
which has gone pretty public. So I'm on there kind of on and off. Unfortunately, I tend to go on there while I'm at work, while it's really quiet at the moment. So yeah, we've got a nice, interesting, diverse community, and I think it's really worth interacting with them on there. The forums are still in use as well, so if you prefer the traditional method, then do that. But yeah, if you really, really want to get hold of me, then just tweet me. It's probably the best way to do it.
You're right. I forgot about Discord. I think I have given a shout out to the Discord on some other episodes, but probably not enough. We do have an RPG fan Discord. I think it may be invite only, so if you do require an invitation, go into the RPG fan message boards and inquire on the thread there, and Grieg, our moderator, or one of the other staff members will be able to get you into the Discord. It is a popping discussion. There's always too many updates for me to follow it properly.
On top of our own messaging system, it's like it's kind of overwhelming because it's like I have 50 messages in this one and then 100 messages in
Yeah, geez,
Discord. It's like,
I have
oh,
yeah, I have some personal limit on how much social media I can engage in before it becomes too much, and Discord might be over my limit. I have used the Discord some, but maybe but not enough for it to really count as me engaging in it. Mostly whenever someone posts something in the sports minigame, I'll say something snarky and complain about how the Wizards are bad.
oh, never get it.
So, and listeners, if you want to contact me directly, you can find me on Twitter as @therealmonsoon or @evoker for dogs, and on the forums, I am Monsoon. On Discord, I think I'm also Monsoon, probably. No, I'm Monsoon Mike on Discord. Okay, that's what I am. So, I think that about does it for Retro Encounter this week. Look forward to 2017 year in review next week. Thank you. Good night, and good luck.